And with that, we are fully resolved and we're all in the room now, so we can take off our masks and seated. I just want to start by acknowledging that we are gathered on these lands that are the traditional territories of the Coast and Strait Salish people, specifically the Lekwungen-speaking people known today as the Songhees and the Esquimalt First Nations, and that their connections to these lands continue to this day. Also, of course, this is being live streamed, but also will be available for future viewing on the municipal website. This is Committee of the Whole, which is where council gets together in a less formal body, and following this we'll have a special council meeting to complete our business for the year. All of the items on the Committee of the Whole are open for public input. If anybody wishes to call in on those, as the agenda items come up, I will remind you, but the phone number to call to participate or provide feedback is 250-598-3311. That's 250-598-3311. So the first item on our agenda tonight.
Unless more participants join, this conference will end in 5 minutes. Enter *1 to cancel and continue the conference.
We just have to apparently not talking enough or talking too much or something that's going on that's trying to kick us off. Item number 1 on the agenda, we have electronic vehicle charging stations. And I believe we have Mr. Rennick here, our Manager of Engineering, to do a quick overview. And we have, of course, a staff report on the agenda. Mr. Rennick, are you there?
Good evening, Your Worship. I'm here. I don't know if you can hear me.
We can hear you now. Yes, there was a bit of odd noise there.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Basically, the question before Committee of the Whole, Your Worship, is whether or not the District of Oak Bay should start charging a user fee for the use of the electric vehicle stations. We did note in the report that City of Victoria will start charging $1 per hour in the new year. And I have seen in the Times Colonist that District of Saanich will also begin charging $1 per hour to use the stations in the new year. I'd just like to point out that the $1 per hour was not chosen to generate revenue per se, more to defray the cost of acquiring the stations, maintaining them, paying for the electricity, etc.
Thank you, Mr. Rennick. The questions. So the process here will be, it should just again remind the public, if anybody wishes to call in on this item, you can call in to 250-598-3311. But now we'll go to questions. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Rennick, thank you so much for this report. I think it's a very good idea to expand this program. I also think it's a good idea for us to pay for this service. I'm wondering where the money is actually coming from to pay for these. I think you said that it was going to be $28,000 to put in the 3 electric vehicle charging stations. And I'm just wondering if you can tell me, does that come from capital or operations, or where does that money come from?
Mr. Rennick?
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to staff or to council. There is a $50,000 budget item in the 2021 financial plan for the acquisition of more electric vehicle stations. I believe it is capital, but Christopher Payne can correct me if I am mistaken in that assumption.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Payne is not shy about jumping in, so if we're wrong, jump in. Otherwise, we'll continue the conversation. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you. So I think that in your report it says that there's an $1,100, or there's money that will come back from the use of these, the money raised from these charging stations, and that money will go back into the Climate Action Reserve Fund. And I'm wondering whether or not, or if the money will actually, could the money actually be used to pay back the money that it cost to put these charging stations in to begin with. So out of that $50,000, if we're using $28,000, can we actually use the money raised from people paying for the charging to go back into that fund?
Mr. Rennick?
Thank you very much. I would actually like to have Mr. Payne respond to that question.
I think that's fair. I think that's a fair comment. Mr. Payne, if you're online, are you able to answer Councillor Braithwaite's question?
Yes, Your Worship, and an excellent question. The analysis that Mr. Rennick prepared included the consideration of the full life cycle costs of the infrastructure. So when Mr. Rennick indicates that should council wish to charge a fee on the service, that the district stands a chance of producing an annual surplus. That surplus includes consideration of the life cycle costs. So in other words, yes, the expected replacement cost of that infrastructure would be paid for by the fee and placed in the infrastructure renewal reserve. Anything over and above that would go into the climate action reserve.
Thank you. I also note that Climate Action Reserve, the acronym stands for CAR, which is very interesting. But anyhow, the one other thing that I would like to clarify is on page 4 of the reports in under point 4.3, the paragraph that starts out saying operational cost is estimated. It says in there that there's an $1,100 premium from flow for revenue collection, but I'm thinking that perhaps should say for the other service, what's it called, the charge point, not flow. Is that correct? If you can see where I'm looking, it's on point 4.3, and it's the second last paragraph.
We have some
Yes,
very,
that's correct.
very strange noises. Mr. Rennick, are you able to answer the question?
Yes. Hi, I'm sorry. I don't know if I'm coming through clearly or not. That is correct. That was a formatting mistake. That should say a premium from charge point, not flow.
Thank you very much, and that's the extent of my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Green?
Thank you, and through you to Mr. Rennick. Thank you very much, Mr. Rennick. And just a question, if over time we see that that maintenance and so on and the ability or inability to expand stations requires a higher user fee, will that be something we can consider at a future time? In other words, are we locked into the dollar per hour indefinitely, or are there options to increase the fee per hour depending on the need and service requirements? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Mr. Rennick?
Through you, Mayor. Thank you. That's an excellent question. Our recommendation is that the fee be reconsidered at the end of 2021. So essentially that we do a 1-year pilot with the $1 fee and that council have a chance to reevaluate that after 1 year has passed.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Go ahead. Maybe we can have a 99-cent sale or something on special days. Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Rennick, for this report. I'm wondering, in reading the report, when these selections of the locations were determined, if the consideration was also given at that time to the advantages of perhaps having any of the charge stations located closer to businesses in our villages.
Mr. Rennick?
Through you, Mayor, the considerations that were made were around having the charging stations be located on municipal property. We do already have one at the Oak Bay Municipal Hall. We did not look at this time at adding additional stations to the Municipal Hall parking lot, but if council would like to provide that direction, we could look at adding more stations in Oak Bay Village.
Thank you. There are 2 other parking lots, Monterey and the parking lot directly across from Monterey, that are municipal parking lots as well that might be considered in future as well. Are there any other? Go ahead, Councillor Nathan, Councillor Appleton.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for the report. Lots of good detail here. What's the, in terms of the options, the two, and by the way, I think it's, we'll get here obviously, but I do think it's important that we align with the changes going on in other districts, or we create another kind of problem. But my question here is there's the charge point and flow networks, and I'm just wondering, there's a recommendation to go with the charge point over the flow, if I've read this correctly, and I'm just wondering what that rationale is. If you could speak to that, please.
Mr. Rennick?
Through you, Mayor. The rationale behind using ChargePoint in the situation where we charge a user fee is that ChargePoint collects a 10% premium on revenue, whereas Flow collects a 15% revenue, or a 15% premium, I'm sorry. And furthermore, ChargePoint allows for dynamic pricing where you might charge different rates during evening rush hour or a lower rate in the middle of the day, for instance, which although we are not recommending using those features right now, we felt that in the future, if we were to collect revenue, it would be nice to have some of those features available to us. On the other hand, if council's direction is to continue providing free charging, we felt that the additional costs associated with ChargePoint are not justified in a situation where you're not charging users a fee to use the stations.
Thank you, Mr. Rennick. Councillor Appleton?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to staff. And I don't want to put staff on the spot here because they may not have information about other jurisdictions, but I do note that City of Victoria and the District of Saanich are, as noted, going to $1 an hour charging. I was under the impression that both Victoria and Saanich primarily use the Flow network and are now going to charging using their existing stations. I'm not sure whether that's actually true or not, though. So I'm not sure whether staff are aware of whether or not Victoria and Saanich are switching out their stations when they go to a pay-for-use model or not.
Mr. Rennick, you know the charging system is going to be used in Saanich and Victoria?
No, Your Worship, I do not.
Okay, thank you. And just for our clarification, the charger we have in the parking lot currently is a Flow charger. Is that intended to stay, and will just the new systems will be ChargePoint, or is the intention to replace all of them?
Thank you, Your Worship. The intention was to replace that station. ChargePoint offers a 50% discount on the purchase of a new station if it is replacing a Flow or another installation, and I have factored that cost into the options analysis.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Green? Okay, before we get to a motion, I just want to make a call to Ms. Williams. Is there any phone calls in from the public on this item?
No, Your Worship, no calls at this point.
Okay, then yes, a motion would be in order.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm prepared to move option number 1, that it be recommended to council to direct staff to procure 3 electric vehicle charging stations to replace the station at the Municipal Hall and to be installed at 2 additional locations, and that the stations charge $1 per hour user fee, with the fee to be reviewed at the end of 2021.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Is there any, so this is the point we can have discussion. Any discussion on this item? Oh, your microphone is.
Sorry.
Is there any discussion?
Councillor Zelka?
Go ahead, Councillor.
Sorry, do I have the floor? It's Eric.
Yes, go ahead, Councillor Zelka. You have the floor.
Oh, thank you very much, Chair. Sorry, did I hear someone say that it's option 1 is being recommended, which is to make no changes in the report, or are we moving the staff recommendation? That wasn't unclear.
I understand this to be a staff recommendation, Councillor Zelka.
Oh, thank you very much. I can support that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Not seeing any. I will call the question. All those in favor? And Councillor Zelka?
In favor.
All right, thank you very much. We move on to the next item on the agenda, which is Development Variance Permit and Advisory Design Panel for 2740 Beach Drive. I just want to, I guess, just introduce here, but remind anybody at home who wishes to call in and speak to the variance portion of this application that they can do so, and the phone number is 250-598-3311. But first, I'm just going to invite our manager of planning, Ms. Jenk, Jensen to introduce this item.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this proposal would replace the existing home with a new 2-story home and 2 accessory buildings to be located in the rear yard. The applicant is proposing to build a contemporary styled home that would utilize glazing, stucco cladding, and local materials, including local stone and red cedar towards the house composition. The house is proposed to be sited in the central portion of the property, where it would occupy a footprint that's similar to that of the existing home. 15 new trees would also be added to the property to enhance the park-like setting, and which would ultimately exceed the tree canopy cover. The advisory design panel reviewed this proposal at their November meeting, and overall were generally supportive of the application with respect to the design component of the site. One of the components, however, is the siting of one of the accessory buildings in the northwest corner of the site. That building has been located in such a way that it does comply with the 1.52 meter rear lot line setback, which also places it completely outside of the right-of-way area, with the exception of an eave projection into the right-of-way area. That siting does not comply, however, with the interior side lot line setback, and so a variance is requested. Just as a point of information, so the side yard setback calculations in the Uplands area are based on a sliding scale based on lot breadth. So larger properties would require larger setbacks. For example, a property that is 35 meters in breadth would require a 4.57 meter setback, and a property that is 20 meters in breadth would require a 3-meter setback. So it's very contingent on the size of the property. The subject property has a lot breadth of 31.5 meters, thereby requiring a 4.27 meter interior side lot line setback. The applicants are requesting a 1.52 meter setback to accommodate the siting of that one accessory building. The staff review of the application suggests that, as with the advisory design panel, the overall siting and design of the proposal is generally supportable. The specific siting of the accessory building, however, is in conflict with the Uplands guidelines, particularly where the building would not contribute to the park-like atmosphere and would not adhere to the broader Uplands setbacks. The proposed siting is the preference of the applicant in order to create more usable outdoor space, but there are no other identified conditions as to why the building could not comply with the setback requirements. So to summarize, staff are generally supportive of the overall design, however, consistent with the direction of the advisory design panel, not necessarily supportive of the siting of that one accessory building, such that staff are not able to recommend support of the application because of that building. While all other aspects of the proposal are compliant with the zoning bylaw regulations and the Uplands design guidelines, the accessory building necessitates a negative recommendation for the proposal. Because the development variance permit and Uplands siting and design applications are running concurrently, should council follow the recommendation provided in the staff report, both these applications would be denied. No variance would be approved, which means the siting component of the Uplands application would also be denied. The applicant would then have to wait for 6 months before making another application to construct a home on the site. Another alternative could be for council to deny the variance application and refer the Uplands siting and design application back to staff. That could give us some direction to work with the applicant to massage the siting such that it is in compliance with all the zoning regulations. Staff could then work with the applicant to amend those plans before bringing the Uplands application back to council at their January meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Jensen. And I understand we have Mr. Whitney from Novus Properties as the owner representation on this call. I also just want to point out there was a late letter sent by the owners on the agenda package. So if you were looking at an earlier version of the agenda package, you might not have seen that. So I want to make sure everybody is up to speed on that. So is Mr. Whitney on the line, Ms. Williams? Yes, okay. So at this point, I'm just going to go back to this table and ask members of the committee if they have any questions of either the applicant or of staff on this item. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you. I noticed, through you, Chair, I noticed that on the advisory planning minutes that there was a question asked about as to what the accessory building was going to be used for, and there was no answer that said what it was going to be used for, and I'm wondering if there is a use for this accessory building or what the planned use of this accessory building is.
Sure, and I'm happy to put that to the applicant. Mr. Whitney, if you're there, perhaps you can answer that question as to the use of that building, but perhaps I'll give you also a bit of room if you want to articulate the rationale for the variance request as well, because that's not as clear, I think, except for the letter that was provided just recently. Welcome.
Hi.
Hello,
Thanks
Mr. Whitney.
for taking the time to review this. Through you, Mayor, the use of the accessory building, sorry, I'll rewind a little bit there. In originally planning to design the home, there was great debate whether or not to use or to add a basement to create more space for the growing family and the multiple generations of the family that will use the home. Adding a basement would add about 2,400 square feet. And so we felt that the better use for the use that was required was an accessory building. It gives us access for storage of different things like kayaks, bikes, mobility equipment that's at grade rather than below grade. Obviously nicer natural lighting. So that would be the rear portion of the accessory building. The front portion of the accessory building is going to be used for a workshop where they can also enjoy the nice, bright west-facing backyard. There are a few more points that I can go through. They're on the letter that was submitted late in the day, so I'm not sure if everyone's had a chance to review that or if I should go through those now.
I think it might be worthwhile just to, if you just take 1 or 2 minutes just to touch on the key points of the rationale for the setbacks, that'd be helpful.
Sure. So our first thoughts were that the side yard setbacks are not based on the lot size, only on the lot width, which this is a fairly narrow lot relative to most lots in the Uplands. And the other main point would be that the variance will allow for more usable green space for the young family to use. I'll also note that the chair of the ADP was in favor of the variance, and you can see that he's voted that way in the ADP meeting minutes. He agreed with our rationale. We also feel that in this particular case, the requested siting actually improves the park-like setting in that the accessory building on the lot immediately west of our lot, so on Lincoln Road at 2755 Lincoln Road, has an accessory building at the same setback, so at the 5-foot setback as opposed to the 14-foot that zoning requires. If our building is forced to be at the 14 feet required by zoning, you're creating quite a bit more vertical wall. So if the buildings are aligned, you only see one building. If they're not aligned, you see 2 buildings. So we feel that this is kind of a unique scenario on this lot. And that accessory building that is at the 5-foot setback on Lincoln Road was built in 2017. So we don't anticipate that building changing any time in the near future, and the same for ours, obviously. We also note that 2720 Beach and 2760 Beach are both immediate neighbors and also have accessory buildings along their north boundaries, and both setbacks are the same or less than our requested setback. Locating the building at the 14-foot setback creates an orphan space north of the building and will not serve any benefit to the use of the property. Nothing will grow being at the north, and the space becomes unnecessarily isolated and abandoned. We've also spoken with our 4 immediate neighbors, and all are in support of the variance. They've all signed a letter that was submitted and had no issue with the variance. And
Thank
I
you.
think we also recognize that under the current process, new designs are allowed to apply for a variance. Therefore, we felt that we are allowed to request this variance, and similar variances have been approved. For example, the house right behind. We also recognize that other situations do not represent precedent for future projects. we just ask the council consider our scenario based on the merits of this property.
Thank you very much, Mr. Whitney, and I'll come back to this table then. Thank you for answering the more broad questions attached to this. Councillor Braithwaite, you had the floor. Did you have any other questions?
I'm just, I guess, when I look at this, I do have difficulty with that second accessory building, especially based on the fact that the main building is being built to the extent of what the bylaw allows, and I would assume that's maybe perhaps Mr. Whitney can answer this question, but this is a house that's probably over 7,000 square feet.
Mr. Whitney, do you have the scale of the house handy? I think it's in the plans in front of us, but I don't have a way of looking it up.
It's kind of hard to tell. I'd have to do some addition.
Mr. Whitney, do you have the
staff report suggests 6,000 square feet.
So a pretty big house, and so I guess that I have difficulty with that second accessory building, but I'll wait to hear the comments of my fellow councillors.
So I'm going to invite any other questions at this time, and I'll invite the public, and then I'll come back to this table for discussion. Are there any other questions of the applicant or staff on this item?
Councillor Zelka?
Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you, Chair. A question will be through you to staff. I noticed for the 6,000 or nearly 6,000 square foot house with the two accessory buildings, are there any existing legal and non-conforming aspects to the current house as it stands today? Separate from the new house, I'm talking about the existing house.
Ms. Jensen, are you aware of any non-conformances in the current home?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Zelka. I'm not aware of any legal non-conforming status of the existing home. Having said that, it's something we'd have to look into a little bit more. The application is based on a review of what is being proposed.
No, completely understood, and thank you for that response. I couldn't see any obvious legal non-conforming aspect, but I wanted to just confirm with you whether you had looked into that or not. Since, for me, it is relevant and germane for something like this. I would tend to, because it's a new build, because it's starting from a clean slate, I would prefer staying within the zoning bylaw, especially for a house of this size. I understand the argument for houses nearby that also have a potential variance. However, if those houses ever came forward and wanted to tear down, I would want that a non-conforming aspect on the other house removed to maintain the park-like character and particular aspect of the Uplands area. So I will be supporting the staff recommendation should that one go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Any other questions of staff or applicant at this time? I'm not seeing any. Ms. Williams, has anybody called in to speak to the item?
No, Your Worship, not at this time.
Okay, thank you. And so I'll bring it back to this table. I just will give one last chance here for the applicant if they wish to have any, if there hasn't really been any additional questions to speak about other than the existing non-conforming. But Mr. Whitney, is there anything else any questions raised that you would like to add?
Just that the living space of the house is only 5,200 square feet. There is some additional space with the garage. And then so I think the main point that I would make when considering is, we're obviously not discussing the size of the accessory, just its location. And in regards to the park-like setting, which I think is the leading factor here for everyone but the homeowner, is that if the accessory building is forced to or is required to meet the setback of zoning at 14 feet, you will still be looking at structure at the 5-foot point, because the building that is immediately behind it on the lot behind, again, was built in 2017, so we don't expect it to be redeveloped as it's brand new. If our building moves over, you will just see that building. So we're sort of making a decision whether we're going to look at our building or the building on the lot behind. If our building aligns with that building, there's 23 feet of visible wall. If it doesn't align with that building, there's 34 feet of visible wall, if that makes sense. If you imagine
No,
two
we
buildings
understand that.
sliding side to side.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Whitney. Anything else?
I think that is everything.
Okay. Thank you very much. So back to this table then. Go ahead, Councillor Nay.
Through you, Mayor, I just have a question to staff, if I may. To staff, in trying to understand what the advisory design panel is saying in their report, the way it's been reported out here is that the panel believed that the application was consistent with the general guidelines of the Uplands neighborhood and therefore supportable, but they didn't support it just because they said that a variance wasn't necessary. So my question is, not having been there, I was trying to understand, would the panel, they may not have answered this, but would the panel have seen that going along, that denying the variance would still keep the application in compliance with the general guidelines of the Uplands neighborhood?
Ms. Jensen?
I mean, I presume that to be the case, but I'm just wondering if you could speak. Is that very clear? Did anybody understand
I'll let
that?
Ms. Jensen try and answer that if she can.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will do my very best to answer what I think I heard. Yes, when the design panel was considering the application, as a whole, they were generally supportive of the siting of the existing home. Generally speaking, they thought the elements that for composition of the design were well done. Looking at the implementation of trees on the site, all of those pieces were acceptable to the design panel. Where they struggled with was that siting of that accessory building. So recognizing that as a whole, the project was okay. There was much discussion and ultimately a recommendation from the design panel against the siting of that building. Very similar to the discussion that the Committee of Whole is having tonight, were some of the same comments heard at design panel.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? We can have a motion, discussion. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
So just a quick question, and I know that Ms. Jensen in her preamble mentioned that if we could do one of a number of things. We could either deny as per the staff recommendation, or we could choose to approve the siting and design of the house, but not the accessory building. Is that correct?
I'll take a stab at this, Ms. Jensen, and correct me if I'm wrong. If the variance isn't acceptable, the motion would be basically to decline the variance and to send the design back, because we can't move it forward without the variance because the package includes the variance, back to the applicant, to staff to work with the applicant to revise it to be brought back forward. If it moved forward for approval, then it would go forward as for variance approval, notification, etc. If you just said no, we don't want this at all, then that puts a bit more of a hard stop on everything. So I think one of the first two options is the preferred option. I'll go to Ms. Jensen. Did that accurately summarize the scenario?
Yeah, I think that's pretty close. If council, just to reiterate, if council does not want to move this forward, they would deny both applications, and at that point in time, the applicant would be looking at submitting a new application for siting and design. If council is okay with the entire program, you could move that forward for notification, and it would come back in January for consideration of approval of both the siting and design and the variance. But if you're looking at generally being okay with the siting and design, but not including the variance, you could refer that back to staff with the proviso that we do something to fix the siting of that building, working with the applicant.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Green?
I'm prepared to move a motion.
Please do.
And it would be the third option that Ms. Jensen just described to us, that we approve the the main portion of the application, but that we defer on the variance and refer it back to staff so that they can work with the applicant. I was at the meeting.
Before you motivate, I'm just
sorry.
going to see if there's a seconder for your
second.
motion. Okay, it's
Second
moved.
by Councillor Zelka.
Okay, so the motion is, getting a point of privilege, I'll take it as from Councillor Appleton for clarification. You have to turn off your microphone, Councillor Green, for a moment.
Just for clarification on the motion, Your Worship, this is to deny development for variance permit DVP 00102 and refer Uplands Siting and Design EDP 00126 back to staff for future work on bringing the project into compliance.
That is correct.
Okay.
That is the motion on the table.
Just
Thank you.
wanted to
Good, clean language there, Councillor Appleton. Appreciate that. Go ahead, Councillor Green.
Well, just briefly, I was at that meeting, and Ms. Jensen described the process accurately. I just, I think the third option is a good option. I personally respect the opinion of the advisory design panel, the majority opinion, and I think also we do often struggle, we meaning councillors and panel members, with variances on new buildings. I think it's hard to do, and I'm concerned that we do try and comply with the design guidelines generally for the uplands and respect the park-like setting. And I think that was the major concern of the accessory building, and that it was not consistent with that goal.
Thank you very much. Is moved and second. Any other discussion on this item?
Councillor Zelka.
Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to confirm for the motion, is the motion to move forward with what the panel recommended, which is to consider approving the Uplands Siting and Design application, but to refer the development variance permit back, or are we referring the whole thing back and denying development variance permit?
Sure. So for my clear, I'll take again a stab at this. The motion is to deny the variance, but send the application back to staff to rejig the design and bring it back without the variance.
Oh, okay. So if I could recommend through you that for the staff reports going forward, within the body of the staff report is a recommended motion that is not reflected in the options at the bottom of the report, which for me makes it very confusing because this is option number 3 we're going with, which is actually in the body of the report. If I could please ask through you for staff to, and should this occur in the future, that they put those recommended options down at the bottom to help us with wording, please.
Okay, I'll just take that as for advisement at this point and not related to the motion on the
Thank
table. Thank you. Is there any other discussion on this item? I'm not seeing any. I will, I'm not objecting to this enough to vote against the majority if it sounds like that's the way it's going to go, but I think in general, this does beg the question of how we adjudicate these things in terms of local setbacks. If there's a cluster of a certain style and a certain place of setbacks, do we consider that? But at this point, I think I understand where this is going. So I will, seeing any of the discussion, I will call the question. All those in favor of the motion? Any opposed? None opposed. Councillor Zelka?
I'm in favor of referring it back and
Okay.
to deny the development variance permit. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So that motion passes. So to the applicant, this will go back for you and staff to work on this to come back with a mechanism to bring forward an application without that variance. So thank you very much for your time this evening. And I move on to item number 3 on the agenda. And at this point, I'm going to recuse myself from this item. I believe that I have a slight pecuniary interest on this just because I'm within the notification range of the variance. So that would sort of by nature indicate that I may be influenced by the outcome. So I'm going to hand this over to Councillor Braithwaite, who is the current acting mayor.
Dinner. No, no.
Mr. Whitney, I think you're still on the phone. I love the sound of family in the background at our meetings these days. So if I may, with that, I'm just going to hand this over to Councillor Braithwaite. Just give me a moment to mask up and leave the room. And if I ask everybody else to mask up as I depart as well, and just someone can send for me when this item is done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And while you're leaving the room, I'm going to invite the public to call 250-598-3311 if they have any interest in item number 3, which is Development Variance Permit DVP 103-388 King George Terrace. And I believe that we have Ms. Jensen, Manager of Planning, to introduce this item.
She should be able to unmute.
Ms. Jensen, are you there? If you are, we can't hear you, so we're working on that.
Sorry, we're having some technical difficulties on this end. I think we're unmuted now.
I think you are. If you can talk about this this item, thank you.
Thank you. This development variance permit application proposes to vary the height and setback sections of the zoning bylaw in order to undertake some renovations to the home, including adding both a partial second story and an open front porch on the front of the home. The building is currently an approximately 2,060 square foot single story home, for which the owners are proposing to add a partial second story on the front portion of the house, as well as the front porch, which brings the total floor area to just over 2,600 square feet. The home as it sits today has a legal non-conforming front setback, which is also reflected in the homes on either side of the property. Because the addition utilizes the main floor of the home as the base for the addition, the second story will extend 2 feet beyond the existing front building wall. So that, in addition to the construction of the front porch, necessitates the request for the variances. Those variances would be for both building and occupiable heights, as well as the front lot line setback. No roof height variance is necessary, as the owners are proposing a flatter roof to minimize the massing of the addition. And staff are looking for council direction.
Thank you, Ms. Jensen. And can I confirm that the applicant is available to answer any questions? Yes.
Yes, I'm available.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much. I'll bring it back to this table. Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Patterson.
Is it on now? Yeah. Thank you, Acting Mayor. And through you to probably the applicant, perhaps staff. The southwest ground view shows a wall or gate installation and an overhang extension that's not shown on some of the other elevation drawings. Could we receive clarification on what that is?
Thank you. And to the applicant.
Sorry, do you want me to answer this?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. On the south, are you looking at the south elevation?
It is on the southwest ground view, which is the front perspective of the finished dwelling, what it would look like in reference to the street. And there is an overhang that juts out from the house. And also it looks like a gate below that. I'm just trying to understand what that projection from the side of the house is.
That's an existing bay window that is on the side of the house. And below it is an existing fence.
But it looks on the plan that I have, it looks like there is a projection from the new building in front of the bay window that is extending out. I can see where the bay window is extending out, but I don't understand what that overhang is.
I think for clarification, I think that Councillor Patterson is looking at number 11, page number 11, where you can see the front view of the house and you can see the bay window on the left-hand side. And in front of the bay window, it looks like there's a wall with 2 windows in it, with 2 small white windows.
We don't have those.
I don't have page 11 in front of me. I'm sorry. I have a drawing, A41, but I'm looking at the front elevation of the house. So there is a bay window on the side. Below it is a sliding gate that will access the driveway to the garage at the rear.
I think that probably answers the question. I think it's the sliding gate. We're looking at the southwest ground view.
Yeah, so they say southwest last one. Yeah, I'm sorry, I believe we're looking at the same thing.
I think we are, yeah. Is that okay, Councillor Patterson? Yeah. Any other questions for the applicant? Councillor Green.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to the applicant. Thank you very much for being here. And just a question about your neighbor to the west. Have you talked about this extension? And the only reason I ask, it appears that it might have an impact on their views, their street views, both east and west. And I just wondered if you had discussed.
We have spoken to both neighbors, east and west. They both have written letters in support of our proposal. And no, we believe that our design has no impact on their views.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Zelka, do you have any questions?
Councillor Zelka, yes, thank you.
Yes.
The question I have is regarding the, I guess it's called the front variance. The houses on either side, I wish it would, the drawings showed me where the houses end. I see adjacent dwelling on one side. Yeah, how does this house compare to the houses on either side with respect to the front variance request? Through you,
sorry,
to staff.
It's a little unclear. Your question is the question: how does our house relate in plan to the immediate adjacent houses either side?
I believe that's the question.
Sorry,
yes.
Chair. I'll ask the staff first if they could please comment on how this the variance request that's moving towards the street, which is the variance request, the larger one. How does this compare to the variances that are already in existence on houses on either side, please?
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Ms. Jensen?
Thank you. So just to clarify, there are not necessarily any approved variances attached to the adjoining properties, but all three of those homes are considered to be legal non-conforming. So for example, the neighbor to the north, which is the home that is closer to Beach Drive, that measurement is approximately 5 meters from the front lot line to the front of the porch that's on that home. Whereas the neighbor to the south, it's approximately 7.1 meters from the property line to the front face of that home. In comparison, the subject property, so the home that you're looking at tonight, to the front face of the building is approximately 7.5 meters. But the way our zoning bylaw is interpreted, that measurement is to the front face of the building. So by the time you take into account, for example, the bay window that's sitting on the front of that home, the building itself is probably at about 6.5 meters from the front lot line.
Thank you, Ms. Jensen. Does that answer your question, Councillor Zelka?
Mostly. I understand in our zoning, we tend to have that ratio, which basically, with respect to the front point of the house that's closest to the street, is usually if there's the way it should be cited normally under the normal aspects of the zoning bylaw, it's usually in relationship to the house on either side. So will this house be jutting out in an unusual way according to our zoning, or will it be within that ratio guideline that is provided by our zoning bylaw?
Thank you. Ms. Jensen?
I think I know what Councillor Zelka is referring to. I don't have that information in front of me, but I know that section of the bylaw is taken into consideration when we undertake the zoning analysis, so that component would comply.
Thank you, Ms. Jensen. Councillor Zelka?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Chair. And through you to staff, the setback is measured to what I understood was that the setback was measured to the face of the house, face of the structure. So I'm just wondering about the porch, and does the new porch structure doesn't have to fit within that setback, but it does count towards the impervious area of the front yard. So provided that it doesn't exceed lot coverage numbers, it's acceptable in the front yard. I'm not sure whether I'm saying that correctly.
Thank you. Ms. Jensen?
Thank you. So if I think what you're asking is that the porch itself is obviously the piece that needs the largest variance. That is exempt from floor area, so it does not count towards floor area, and it doesn't count towards the impervious surface because it is a structure, but it is exempt from the floor area. It does count towards lot coverage.
Thank you. Is that good, Councillor Appleton? Great. I'm just going to go to staff to see if is there any other questions actually from committee? No. So I'm going to go to staff to see if there's any callers coming in for this item.
None at this time.
Thank you so much. Okay, so coming back to this table, would anyone like to put a motion on the table?
I will move the staff recommendation.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any further discussion? The only comment that I would like to make is that I was just so pleased to see an addition to a building rather than a tear down of a building. So I'd like to thank the applicant for that. Seeing no other discussion, Councillor Zelka, any other discussion?
Can you hear me? Sorry, am I muted?
Nope, you're good.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, thank you very much, and appreciate the opportunity to speak one more time. I'm afraid I'll be voting against this. I just find it too close to the street. If it could possibly be, for that reason alone, I'll be voting against this. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to call the question on the motion. All in favor? And opposed?
Opposed.
Councillor Zelka opposed. Thank you very much. And we will get the mayor to come back in, and we will move on to item number 4, which will be Development Variance Permit DVP 104-2690 Beach Drive. And if anyone is wanting to call in from the public, they can do so at 250-598-3311. And you'll be ready to chat when we're ready.
Thank you very much, Councillor Braithwaite, for taking over. And we move on to item number 4 on the agenda, which is another development variance permit for 2690 Beach Drive. Again, just to encourage anybody who wishes to call in on this item to call into 250-598-3311. Ms. Jensen, are you ready to just provide a quick overview of this item?
Thank you, Your Worship. This particular application proposes renovations to an existing accessory building that's located at the rear of a single-family home, which is on Beach Drive, just south of the Uplands neighborhood. The accessory building was constructed in 1942 and is considered legal nonconforming for its siting. The proposed modifications necessitate a variance to the side lot line, which is that nonconforming aspect. The renovations include increasing the height of the building by about 2 feet to improve headroom within the garage. The overall appearance of the building is also being updated to include new doors, new skylights, and brackets. Because of the non-conforming siding, the modifications to the building necessitate a variance for the side lot line. A review of the application indicates that the alterations will not substantially impact the existing siding, nor increase the building's footprint. There is no interference with any laneway or any infrastructure within the lane itself. At that step, we're looking for council direction.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jensen. And if we can just, any questions here from members of the committee of the whole? Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, I'm just wondering if we know if this building will still be used as a garage once the renovation is done on it.
Ms. Jensen?
And indications that we have from the applicant are still for some vehicle storage as well as other forms of storage and use, complying with the zoning bylaw.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, thank you. Any other questions of the applicant or of staff? We do have the applicant available for questions as well, do we? Okay, we won't go there unless we need to, but I believe we do have one call from the public on this item.
It is the applicant, Mr. Robertson.
Okay, Mr. Robertson, I don't think unless there's questions directed, we don't need any additional input, I don't believe here. This is really, at this point, to decide whether or not it's going to go out for public notification and come back to this table. So are there any other questions? I will ask, is there any other members of the public that wish to speak? Okay. Councillor Patterson?
Yes, thank you. And as a follow-up to Councillor Braithwaite's question, it doesn't appear that there will be a garage door on the revised plan for the building. And perhaps if the planning staff could just outline for us what the parking requirements are on that lot, and if the conversion of this building does not permit for use as a parking garage, how the parking would be accommodated on the lot otherwise.
Okay, thank you. And maybe this is a chance to ask the applicant, if he's on the phone, to answer the question about the use of that building, if it's still going to be used as a garage. And I believe it was Mr. Robertson. Did I get the name right?
Your worship, he's on the landline telephone, so I'm going to let him through, and then if we can repeat the question, that would be great.
Oh, sure. Thank you very much. Are we, is Mr. Robertson on?
I'm just waiting for him to come through from reception.
Okay.
Your worship, if I may, while we're waiting for the applicant, if I could refer you to Plan A 3.02, it will show you where the doors are proposed to be on the garage.
The building is to have it as a multi-purpose building right now.
Hold on a second.
Mr. Robertson? Mr. Robertson, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Council has a question that they would like answered. If you could just wait a moment, they will express that question for you again so you can hear it.
Okay.
We're just having a look at the plans more in detail. Mr. Robertson, the question was just related to the use of that building. Is its intention to continue to be used for a garage?
We can use it for a garage, although I think we intend to use it more for a studio by pulling the car out. Last year we built another garage on the property as well, so there's parking for a car there plus the drive lane to get into that garage. So we have additional 2 parking spots that we constructed last year. So we really are not too concerned if we don't have this as it's a really difficult, it's quite a narrow building. So we can't even open the doors for the garage at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification. So it sounds like it could be used as a garage, but it's not intended to be used as such. Okay, thank you.
A car there plus the drive lane to get into that garage. So we have additional 2 parking spots that we constructed last year. So we really are not too concerned if we don't have this as it's a really difficult, it's quite a narrow building, so we can't even open the doors for the garage at the moment. Okay, thanks very much for that clarification.
Yeah. Thank you. I think you're hearing yourself twice on the webcast in the background is what's happening there. So, okay, back to this table. Are there any other questions of the applicant or of staff? I'm not seeing any. Can I just get a motion? Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
I will move the staff recommendation.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Is there any other discussion on this? I'm not seeing any. Councillor Zelka, anything else to add before I call the question? Not hearing anything. I will call the question. All those in favor? Councillor Zelka? Councillor Zelka, if you're speaking, we can't hear you at the moment. You might be on mute.
Oh, I vote in favor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. And so to the applicant, this means that the variance will move forward for notification to neighbors, and council will consider it with that input at the January council meeting. Item number 5 on the agenda is Uplands Siting and Design. So no variances on this one. Ms. Jensen, can you give a quick overview of this item?
Thank you, Your Worship. So this property is located at the corner of Lansdowne Road and Exeter Road, where the applicant is proposing to replace the existing home with a new 2-story home, approximately 6,700 square feet, and an accessory building. The design itself would incorporate a Georgian style, incorporating brick cladding and wood windows and doors. The home will be sited in the central portion of the site and be well buffered with the addition of 37 new trees onto the site. There are currently 3 protected trees. These are not being removed. There is 1 hawthorn tree, however, out in the boulevard that will be removed due to its poor condition. End result is a tree canopy cover that exceeds the required 45%. The design panel reviewed and supported the application at their December meeting. They did note that the home would incorporate high-quality materials, and with its orientation to Lansdowne Road, the new facade is an improvement to the neighborhood. The property itself, as mentioned, is a corner lot where the new design would be oriented toward Lansdowne Road, and the existing in-ground swimming pool would be retained and upgraded that's currently in the rear yard. The introduction of new trees and improvements to existing vegetation, including the hedging along the property lines, will serve to buffer the new home and enhance the park-like setting. All aspects of the proposal are compliant with zoning bylaw regulations and the Uplands design guidelines. All heights and setbacks are adhered to, and no variances are required. We are now looking for council direction.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jensen. I also just want to remind anybody watching at home that you can call and make comments at this at 250-598-3311 following the question portion of the council. Committee members, are there any questions of the applicant or staff? Not seeing any. I didn't leave a lot of room for time for people to call in to get that notice. So I'll take a motion and we can talk to it. And before we make the call, I will see if there's anybody's called in.
I will move the staff recommendation.
Moved and seconded. Thank you very much. Any discussion on this? Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Yeah, this is not so much about this particular house, but it's more in a question to staff perhaps about, this is a house that's only 62 years old, that's going to be ripped down, and I'm assuming that it's going to end up in a landfill. And I'm just wondering, is there if something can be perhaps put somewhere, and maybe it's to do with the Climate Action Control Group or something like that, where we talk a little bit about, the amount of debris that we're putting into the landfills with the number of rip downs that we're having, the number of demolitions that we're having within our community. I mean, it's a lot, and I'm just wondering whether we can start perhaps looking at giving incentives to either keep a house or to recycle some of the stuff that we're ripping down. Something. It's just something for the future. I'd just like to kind of put that on the radar of everybody, because I think it's something that's important that we need to look at.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. I know a point that Councillor Green has many raised a number of times in the past as well. Councillor Green, I don't want to get down this rabbit hole because we have a development permit in front of us, but if you wish to say anything, you're welcome to. Okay, thank you. I know that it's a topic dear to your heart, so I don't want to ignore that. I don't see any other comments.
Councillor Zelka?
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you very much, Chair. First of all, sincere thanks through you to the proponent for retaining and renovating the existing concrete pool. I appreciate that. I would like to hear what's the expected blasting for this larger house that's going to be replacing the existing house, please.
I will. Ms. Jensen, do you know? And again, go ahead, Ms. Jensen, if you know.
Thank you, Your Worship. We actually don't have an application for demolition in yet, I believe, so I don't have that information.
Thank you, Ms. Jensen.
Question then related. The basement of this building, I couldn't quite tell from the plans. Is it going to be deeper than the existing house, or is it going to be reusing the same foundations with maybe a slight expansion? If staff or possibly the proponent could share that, I'd appreciate it.
Ms. Jensen, do you know how the proposed basement aligns with the current house and basement for depth and location?
Thank you, Your Worship. You are breaking up a little bit, so hopefully I'm answering the right question. The house itself will be located in a similar area to the existing home. So we would have to speak with the applicant, but there may be an opportunity for them to reuse some of the portion of the foundation. But again, that we'd be able to determine that more at building permit stage.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Zelka, would you like me to reach out to the applicant to try and get a more detailed answer?
Would you mind, please? Yes.
I believe we have Mr. Rodier, Mr. Rodier,
Yes.
or Mr. Rodier online to answer the question. Do you have an answer for that question?
Yeah, if you can hear me?
We can, thank you.
Excellent.
Yes.
The home has a shallow crawl space, but doesn't have a full basement. And one of the reasons why we went this direction was to minimize any blasting that we would have to do. So the existing foundation will be removed, but the new home does occupy a similar location to the existing. So we don't anticipate any blasting, but once we dig a little bit, we will see what we find. But the idea was to minimize that. And just while I've got you, in regards to removing of the existing house, that is something that is a concern to us as well, and it's something we try to recycle as much as we can. So before we rarely just demolish the home without first recycling any of the components we can and reselling where possible as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rodier. We've got some interesting clicks and pops on our lines tonight. Are there any other comments or questions?
No, that is satisfactory. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Zelka. I don't see anything else in the room, so I'm ready to call the question then. All those in favor? Any opposed? Councilor Zelka?
In favor.
Thank
In
you.
favor.
Move on to item number 6 on the agenda, Uplands Siting and Design for 2727 Dover Road. Again, if anybody wishes to call in on this item, the phone number is 250-598-3311. Ms. Jensen.
Thank you, Your Worship. So 2727 Dover Road is an existing home that's located on a smaller lot in the Uplands area. It's at about 929 square meters for the entire lot. The owners are proposing a 230 square foot addition to the rear of the home, which will be constructed with materials consistent with the existing home, including vertical wood cladding, vinyl windows, and asphalt shingles. The home itself was constructed in 1956 with an existing floor area of about 3,600 square feet. As part of the proposed works, one Ugari oak tree will be planted at the front yard, which brings the tree canopy cover from 32% to more than 45%. This not only meets the requirements of the tree protection bylaw, but enhances the park-like setting along the street side of the property. The advisory design panel reviewed that application at their November meeting. They were supportive of the application and noted that it's a fairly straightforward application and the existing hedging will serve to conceal the addition from the neighboring properties. Staff have reviewed the application with respect to the site characteristics and the neighborhood. The addition is limited to the rear of the home. It's compliant with OCP policy. It meets the Uplands design guidelines and all zoning bylaw regulations are met. As well, the streetscape and the park-like setting are improved through the planting of that one large canopy tree. Looking for council direction.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the applicant or staff on this? Go ahead, Councilor Green.
I was prepared to make a motion once the public.
Sure, thank you. So not seeing any questions. Are there any members of the public that have called in on this, Ms. Williams?
No callers at this time, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you very much. So then bring it back to the table. A motion would be in order, Councilor Green.
Thank you, Chair, and I will move the staff recommendation that it be recommended to council that the proposal to renovate an existing single-family dwelling at 2727 Dover Road, as outlined in this December 14th, 2020 report for ADP 00127 be approved as to Uplands Siting and Design.
Moved and seconded. Thank you very much. Any further discussion? Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, Mayor. I would just like to add that I really appreciate the fact that this dwelling is going to have continuous use with only a very modest addition to it. Thank you to the applicant for that.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. I think a sentiment widely shared. Is not seeing any other discussion. I'm ready to call the question. All those in favor? Councillor Zelka?
In favor, thank you.
Thank you. That passes. And last item on the Committee of the Whole agenda before we move on to Council is 2460 Cotswold Road. If anybody from the public wishes to call in on this, Cotswold Road, the phone number is 250-598-3311. We have Ms. Jensen again to provide an overview.
Thank you, Your Worship. So similar to the previous application, the applicants are proposing an addition at the rear of the existing home, as well as some modifications to cladding elements to update the home. A 45 square foot addition would enlarge the kitchen area at the rear, and a new deck would wrap along the back of the house. Materials to be utilized to maintain consistency around the home include a board and batten base detail, aluminum clad windows, and new wooden doors. Staff have reviewed the application with respect to site characteristics. The addition is limited to the rear of the home. The siting and design of the project are compliant with OCP policy and the Uplands design guidelines, and all zoning regulations are met. The site is heavily treed, and even with the removal of 2 trees that are in poor health, the tree canopy cover will be at approximately 54%, exceeding the required 45%. Staff are requesting council direction.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jensen. Are there any questions of the applicant or staff on this item? Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to staff. I just wanted to confirm, as per the arborist's memo, that the 2 trees that are slated for removal are thus slated because they're in direct conflict with the proposed basketball court. Well, at least one tree is not. One tree is definitely slated for removal, and then we have a 3rd tree which may be impacted as per the arborist's report. So there's one for sure to be removed and one possibly to be removed for the basketball court.
Ms. Jensen?
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Appleton. So the Gary oak tree is being removed, you're correct, and specifically because it is in bad health, and that will require 1 replacement tree. The Douglas fir tree that's close to the basketball court is not necessarily in poor health, but it will be impacted by the installation of that sports court. So that will require 2 replacement trees. And the other one we don't know about at this point in time.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Any other questions? I'm not seeing any. Is there any, Ms. Williams, has anybody called in on this item on the agenda?
No, Your Worship, no calls.
Okay, thank you very much. Last call for any comments. Is there a motion on the table? I've kind of lost track of my own thing. There has not been a motion.
Councillor Zelga?
Go ahead, Councillor.
I just wanted to compliment through you to staff for this report. It's very easy to read and satisfies all questions. So I thank you very much for the way it's written.
Thank you. Is there a motion then from this table?
I'll move the staff recommendation.
And I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any other discussion? Councillor Appleton?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll be speaking in opposition to the motion, mostly because I don't, despite the fact that there is ample tree canopy already on the lot, I think that we have to be very careful about approving tree removals for what I would classify as something that's highly optional in nature. We have to be, we lose enough trees as it is for mandatory aspects of development. So I think we have to be very judicious about how we would grant approval to remove trees for something which I would consider to be an optional thing. So.
Fair enough. Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Any other discussion?
Question from Zelka, Councillor Zelka.
Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
I should have asked this earlier, sorry. Just want to confirm, the replacement trees, let's say 3 replacement trees in total, will they be planted on the property or are they expected to be planted elsewhere?
Ms. Jensen?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Zelka. At this point in time, because this site is so heavily treed, the applicants are working with the Parks Department to determine if those 3 replacement trees could be planted elsewhere. That is not what we would call normal. We normally look for the replacement trees to be planted on the site, but there are times where we can look at planting elsewhere.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to, so if Parks recommends that 1 or 2 could be planted on the property and maybe 1 or 2 elsewhere, that's the way, that's what would occur?
Ms. Jensen?
Thank you. Well, they are currently working with the Parks Department as to the location of those trees. I don't know that anything has been determined yet.
But it is possible for say 1 to be on the property and for 2 potentially to be elsewhere. I just wanted to confirm that is the 3 considered a full set, or is it possible that it could be like 1 or 2 or 3?
Ms. Jensen, or is that what's being worked on? That it's not all or nothing. It could be a portion of them that could be on the property and a portion not.
That is correct. Yes.
Excellent. That was my understanding as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zalka. Any other discussion on this item? Not seeing any here, so thank you. I will call the question. All those in favor? Councillor Zalka?
In favor?
Any opposed? Councillor Appleton opposed. That passes. Thank you very much. It's not entirely finished. All of these have to come back to the committee, the council meeting following this meeting. We are going to adjourn. We need about 15 minutes, is that right? To stop this recording, reset the new recording with the tags, and then start it up again. So we will see you back here at 7:37, and we will start the next meeting.
Move adjournment.
Moved and seconded.
Second.
All those in favor? Councillor Zalka?
In favor?
Any opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. This adjourns this meeting. We will see you back here in 15 minutes. Thank you, everyone.
Participant exiting.
Eric.